Josh, if you have any questions, you feel free to jump in if you have any questions as well. Okay. So, hi, Sarah. Thank you for joining us. Sarah has been with us or like mentoring with us for a couple of years now, and is just a great asset to have or a great resource in the community to have because she's great helping or mentoring startups to understand what a brand means to the business once you're starting out or when you're re-imaging or relaunching something and you want to your product to be reflective when they see your logo or they see your message. It has to relate directly to your service or product. So if you just want to give us, Sarah, a brief intro about like who you are, how you got started on this, when you started your company.
Yeah. So, welcome. My name is Zahra Cruzan, and I am the founder of Brand Author. And we are a brand identity firm. And what that means is essentially we take all of the elements of a brand that you traditionally think of reputation, visual, copy, messaging, offers, packaging and we design it into a cohesive system that works for you and is scalable and will make you money in the long term because that's what we want. And so, how did I get started? That's such a windy, long question. I guess suffice it to say, um, I have multiple backgrounds. I started off in corporate marketing and training, and then I moved into owning a restaurant with my husband. And so I got to see both how corporations do it and how startups do it. Um, and I saw the big gap that was there and some of the core principles that small business owners weren't um, being taught because they didn't have $1 million ad agencies behind them teaching them how to do these things and create these and implement these systems. And so uh, I thought, what a wonderful gap to fill. um, and I'm sure I would have loved to have known this when I had started out my restaurant, and I'm sure others would too. And so there we were born. And so we grew from me in my pajamas behind a computer by myself, working remotely from home. And now we have a team of 8, and we are just building out our offices, uh, our first set of our own offices now. So we're really excited about the growth of that. Although I guess now I'm still working behind my, I guess I'm back working behind my desk for the time being because we're in quarantine from home. But yeah, that's a little bit about me in a nutshell.
Awesome. And I'm curious, a team of 8, have your plans gone back a little bit about keep working from home? Are you looking to office space? Like, how are you looking to grow your company? Like, what was your vision maybe before? Has it changed with the current situation?
Um, Actually, so we have offices now, but they were flooded out just before the quarantine, so that's why we're in limbo right now. We're just waiting for quarantine to be up. No, actual with the plans that we have haven't changed. We're still building out offices, but we were able to get a better space than we originally thought because with real estate being so cheap right now, a couple places that were kind of out of our price point are now within our price point. So that was really nice. We uh, we were going to take out originally we were going to lease a space, and they were going to do kind of a minimal finish out based on the structure that they already had. But now we're going to have offices custom built for us, which is nice. And so we were able to design. I don't have the architect plans yet because we're still uh, working on those, but we were able to kind of go out and like design exactly what we wanted and really make it tailored to the brand and what we were going to be doing and what size rooms made sense and what the flow of the place, all those little details, which is really exciting.
Yes, I'm really excited for you. I think that's gonna be great. Like to build the brand of a brand company. So sounds cool.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, I want to get into a little bit about what you're telling your clients before we start recording the meeting. You mentioned that you were hoping as a business to get less work just because like who would want to like maybe spend money right now, but since you're working with startups, So I don't know if you have like that perspective of both a startup and a non-startup client, and what are kind of the different advices you're giving them, or the questions that you've been getting from them in terms of messaging and branding at this time.
Yeah, so for our current clients, we have basically two sets. We have those that are in the process of launching, and then we have those that have been around and we have rebranded them or in the process of rebranding them. And so to them, there's a couple pieces of advice that we're giving that's the same across the board. And then there's a couple things that are specific to where you are in business, right? So across the board, our advice is look at your data. Right now, there's a lot of emotions going on, and there's a lot of seemingly good ideas out there. And it's very easy to make decisions based on panic um, and reaction. And so the advice is don't react, respond, absorb what's happening, look at it as far as how it makes sense for your brand and what works for your brand, and then develop it out before you just launch it. Because when you launch something, whether it's a product, a service that you didn't think all the way through, and you find out later it's either not what your customers want, or it's not making you any money, or you're in the red to produce it, then what happens is you've got to take it back or just drag it along, and it's just this dead weight, right, for your business. And that's where we start to see confusion with brands, clutter, Um, and so definitely take a beat, don't panic, respond, don't react. And then also take a look at who's surviving this crisis. The companies that are thriving are the companies that have built a tribe. They have a solid brand. Despite the fact that a restaurant's closed, we're seeing things like gift cards being sold. We're having patrons share on Instagram, like, please go buy a gift card from here, or I will buy, a meal for the nurses at the hospital from their favorite restaurants and put it on my bill. And so patrons who love and are raving fans of these brands um, are going out of their way to try and ensure the survival of their favorite spots, right? And that's across the board, restaurants, retail. And so when we look at that and we think about it, look and see what kinds of relationships and what kind of offers these companies are putting together that make them so sticky, that make people want to follow them and keep them alive. And even though it's not the same because they don't get to sit in the restaurant, they're still ordering the food and bringing it home, um, because they want to make sure that those places are there when they open back up. And those are the companies that have spent the time to develop out the brand, who stand the test of time and who've built raving fans. And so look at that and look at your own model and see how closely and intentionally you're developing out your offers to meet the needs of your customers as to what they're doing. Um,
Yes. And then, I mean, I guess I also want to like tap into, because what would be the difference between if I'm already established brand, or even thinking about starting my brand or my business, what are the main difference between a message that's for like storefront or a brick and mortar, and then what would be something that will be online? What are some of the tips, or kind of how does the message change? How does the brand have to fit in when it's all online, or when you don't have contact with your customer, when you're maybe even your customers don't know that you're online? Like, how can you translate maybe that messaging in
yeah,
an
so
online form?
so there's a couple things. First of all, right now it's really important to focus on your offer development. Messaging is important, but right now it's about offer development, and that's where it's like saying it's like your marketing is only as good as your brand is, and so your messaging is only as good as what's behind it. And so if your offer is not developed right, it doesn't matter what you're saying and what messages you're giving. So focus on your product and your offer development first. And what I mean by that is make sure that you're not pivoting, you're evolving, because there's something the one thing you want to keep in mind is that COVID-19 is not going anywhere for the next year or so. Um, a lot of the health experts are saying it may even last up to 2 years, coming back and forth. And once quarantine's lifted, we're likely to see another spike. And then again in the winter, it may come back again over the next year or two. And so we're no longer in a situation where we're having to just hold tight till quarantine's lifted, because if there is a spike, even if quarantine isn't reestablished, people are still going to be hesitant to go out, and that's the reality of the situation. And so make sure that your brand offer, is evolving and not just pivoting. And what I mean by that is, now is the time, now that you've had some time to do your emergency services and your emergency fixes, is what am I going to have to keep for the next uh, foreseeable future for my business, so that I can continue to generate revenue from that. And so that I can start to recoup some of the money that I lost while we were in quarantine. So a lot of companies are going to have to grow out in that way. And so some of you guys who have had a business and you just kind of started doing these emergency offers like delivery, curbside pickup, what have you, now's the time to look at those and make sure that you're calculating your net margins for them. And do they make sense? Does it make sense to keep this? And if it doesn't, what does make sense? And then once you've established these are the things that I'm going to keep moving forward, then you start to develop out the offers. So now how can I make this online offer, or this what was an emergency offer that I didn't really think all the way through? How could I develop it into the brand and bring it close to that same experience they're getting when they walk through the doors? And so that's what I would say, as far as if you're an established brand and you're delivering coffees or you're delivering boutique clothes. Now you start to look at, it was okay to deliver things and, deliver the clothes in a Ziploc bag or an old HEB bag, for the first week because everybody understood. But in 6 months, people are no longer just going to understand. You've got to have everything and the experience mapped out in the same way that you had your bricks and mortar experience mapped out. And then as it comes to messaging and staying visible, um, there are a couple things that you want to tap into on a regular basis that you should have already had established if you're open, which is obviously the social media, and then also emails. Emails are a big missed opportunity. Um, collect emails because you can reach out to them whenever you want. It's free marketing. It is a way to engage with people in a very different way. If you don't have a large email list, one thing you can start to do is create offers. We call them squeeze pages or freemiums, that will give people an incentive to download something that you have in exchange for their email address. So an example of that would be, say you have a really good mocha coffee that you sell at your restaurant. And so you give one of your recipes a way to download. Download this recipe card to make your own at-home mocha, and that's a way to get them on your email address. It's something that they'll do for now, but when businesses open back up, they're not going to want to bother making their own mocha. They're still going to come back to you. So you don't give away the farm, don't give away all your recipes, but give away one recipe in exchange for an email address. Now you've got them on your email list, and you can continue to email them and stay in touch with them. If you are a boutique, then maybe you put together a quick little summer catalog, fashion catalog, and click here to download your fashion catalog. That gets them on your email list, where then you can now email them offers that you might have. So if you don't have one already established, an email list, think of some of these downloads that you can do to up your email list. As far as social media goes, uh, right now, the general mood is a mood of scarcity. And so you always want to come from a perspective of giving. So try and find ways that you can give value to your customers before you start asking them for things. And so the general rule of thumb is give, 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 ask. So when you're posting, it's give value, give information, give hope, give inspiration, whatever it is, give a shout out, and then ask for a sale, and then promote what you're doing. And that helps you not come off quite so um, sales heavy, and match the tone of what's happening around you.
Yes, and I want to touch on both, kind of like the email and more like strategy, and then social media. So going back to the email and more so on kind of numbers, because I think maybe if you own a store, you're used to like looking at your client, understanding like, oh, they're always going to that rack, so I understand that's what sells, or they go to, like, you understand the flow. So I don't know, from the branding side or from kind of your side, what are some of the kind of key indicators, or how we call them, like statistics that you're looking at as part of like, is my brand working, is my messaging working when you're online? So I know like email, you can, like we talked about it, like how you can look at open rate, click rate, and
Uh-huh.
maybe even test out subjects. So like,
Uh-huh.
when you talk a little bit about that, because I think a lot of people are new to it, and the importance of looking at those numbers.
Yeah. So whether and the tools we'll talk about and the statistics we'll talk about, you can get on almost any platform. Any even the free ones like Mailchimp have them. Depending on how detailed you want those reports to be, then you start getting into some paid ones. A really good one that I know of, if you guys don't have one set up or you're not happy with the one you have, is Convertkit. It's like $30 a month. It's really inexpensive and it gives you some really good data and information. So there's a couple things that you want to look at. If you are doing a download, so say take the social media example where you're saying, hey, download the free summer catalog for our boutique, then you can create a form. So it's a little pop-up window and you click on it, you give them your email. So that's the opt-in form. And if you have your Facebook pixel attached to that landing page as an embedded code, which you just copy paste your pixel into the landing page, that will give you a conversion rate. And what that means is it will tell you how many people clicked on the learn more button on the Facebook ad to get into your register, where you have to give them your email address. And then from there, um, how many people clicked on, entered their email information and clicked register to get the thank you pop-up message. And so that will tell you two things. Number one, how many people are even interested in the summer catalog? Because if nobody sees it, so if you look at your Facebook ads and you see that you've got, 10,000 impressions and only 3 people clicked to download it, well, then you know that that's not very appealing to people, the lead magnet that you have. And then from there, from your registration link to your thank you page, you'll get another statistic, another conversion rate. And what that will tell you is how comfortable and how trustworthy you appear to them. So maybe you're asking for their phone number and how many employees they have and like a whole bunch of information. And they're like, well, I don't really know you that well, so I'm going to click off of this and not follow through with it. It was interesting, but not interesting enough to give you all my details. And that can allow you to adjust. Okay, say maybe we went too far when we asked for the phone number. Let's just try an email address, and then after they've gotten a few emails from us and they know we give good quality emails, we'll try again for the phone number. So that's your first range of statistics. As far as the emails go, because once you send them the digital product, the lead magnet that you have, your next step is to give them a nurture sequence. So in your email responder, you can set up an automation that says anybody who downloads this catalog is going to get one email a week for the next 4 weeks, specifically talking about X topic, right? And so you create what we call a nurture sequence, which is how we get somebody from a cold lead who just randomly finds you, clicks on you, and downloads something because they want that one thing, into someone who's looking for you in their inbox. And so it's a nurture sequence that gives even more value past the catalog to continue that discussion. So maybe the next one is, now that you know the summer fashions, find the 3 swimsuits that'll fit whatever body type you have, or and then the one after that is sunglass shades that what sunglass fashions are in for this year. And they're all kind of related back to the same topic of the summer catalog, so we're still staying in line with that theme of summer, and we're just adding even more value as we go. And so for each of those emails, you can have a um, uh, what we call an A/B split test. So you can run emails where you test out 2 different headlines, and that will let you know what catches your reader's attention. So what they do is they send out the emails to a small percentage, like 6% of your audience, and they send half with one email subject line and half with another email subject line, and they pit them against each other. The contents inside are the same. It's just the header that's different. And then after, I think it's 6 hours, whichever headline gets the most opens is the one that they send to the rest of your audience. And that will help you understand where your open rates are coming from, what people are more interested in. And then the second thing you can track with these email tools is what we call an open rate. An open rate basically tells you how many, well, it tells you how many people open the email. But what it really tells you is how many people are excited and feel like your emails are valuable, as far as like they're excited and there's brand interest. And then you have what's called a click through rate. So in your emails, you have the option to put a link in. I highly recommend putting a link into each and every one of your emails. And it doesn't have to be a sales link necessarily. It can be a link to a podcast that you did. It could be a link to a little infographic that you make. It could be a link to your social media page. Hey, go check us out on Facebook. Some sort of link, some sort of call to action, asking them to do something. Because every time they give you a yes, every time they give you a click, it's confirmation that they are your ideal customer. And you want to start to weed them out, or pull them out and weed out everybody else as soon as possible. And so having something clickable in the email, even if it's a social media post to share, a joke or something, having that clickable link inside your email is going to tell you how many people are really invested, where your core audience lies. Because when you're new and you're starting out, it's hard to know how to read the data. And it's hard to understand what information you should be paying attention to and what information you're not. And so your first job is to confirm that who you think your ideal customer is. And when I say ideal customer, I mean the person who finds you the most valuable and is willing to pay the most for what you had to offer. So I could sell a cup of coffee, right? Some people would be willing to spend a gas station $1.99 on it, and some people would be willing to spend $8.99 on it. I want to find the people that would be willing to spend $8.99 on my cup of coffee, and those are my ideal customers. And one way to vet them out is by looking at your conversion rates. You can go in and see a history. Hey, this guy has clicked on every email I've sent him over the last 12 months. He is, so when I send a survey out, his survey responses get hella more weight than the guy who only opened one. And so by working this data in, you can start to see everybody's going to have an opinion about your brand, but not everybody's opinion matters. And so you're going to start to see from the people whose opinion matters first, and then secondly, what they're saying, what they want, and develop your brand and your offers based on what they need, not necessarily the one guy who strolled in to your coffee shop on a whim and only signed up for your email because he got 50% off to sign up his first coffee and then never came back. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think that makes a lot of sense. And if you can, I don't know if touch on also consistency, like what would you say like for a startup, or even by industry, what do you think it's like a good, like how many emails should I send? Or because I've seen people that maybe send out one every like a month or even longer, and it works just because maybe it's a long form email. Like what do you say is a good ratio, or how do you how do you gauge that?
Um, well, there's two things that we develop out when we talk about email strategy. The first is, it doesn't really matter if you're new or old or how long you've been in the industry. That's not really a relevant factor. What is a really relevant factor is your industry. Because if I'm in fashion or I'm in food or I'm a business uh, coach or something to that effect, then things are changing so quickly that content that was relevant last week or last month may not be relevant this month. And so you want to stay based on your industry, you want to stay in the front of things with as quickly, you want to pace it based on how quickly your industry changes, on the other hand, and so think of who your audience is and think of your industry and think of how quickly things change. Because what you don't want to do, better to send your emails out less frequently with better content than to be sending them crap every week that they don't care about. You're just recycling old content. There's nothing of value really in there. There's nothing of interest in there. Because what happens when you get those emails? The first two or three times that you see a headline that you're not really like, nah, you click delete in your inbox. But after you've done it 3 or 4 times, you don't even stop to read the headline. You just know that when it comes in from that sender, you're automatically going to delete them to clean out your inbox until one day you have a little extra time on your hand and you'll actually unsubscribe. And that's what we don't want them to do. So, so say a company like an insurance agency, things don't really change that often. And so there's going to be peak moments like right now where insurance is really important and people and things are changing and there's a lot of things that are different. And so they're going to be sending emails out more frequently during this time. But probably on the regular outside of the COVID landscape, they're going to be probably sending out, a big newsletter every quarter because that's when people are generally looking at things like expenses and costs and insurance and why am I paying for this insurance again? Well, let me remind you, here's your quarterly email about all the stuff we get. Any more often than that, and I know a lot of people are always concerned about being annoying or getting unsubscribed. The reality is that you can't worry about that insofar as people are going to unsubscribe. Every company in the history of companies has gotten unsubscribes, and that's okay. That just means those people aren't right for you, and that just gives you a better idea of who is right for you. But what we don't want them to do is unsubscribe because you're a great company who they would normally love, but you're sending out stuff just because you were told by someone somewhere that every week you have to send an email out. That may not necessarily be true. It just depends on your industry. So, to that point, making sure that you have a strategy in play. And so, so you should always be creating your marketing strategy on for the year before. So usually around October, November, you want to start to review how well your marketing campaigns performed for the previous year. And by no later than December, you should have a plan for what's going to happen the following year. And so when you put that out on your big calendar, you'll be able to map out when email sequences are happening. So I know, for instance, I launch my online course 3 times a year. And so I know that on those 3 buckets of time, I'm going to be sending emails out almost daily. And so I need to be careful that I'm not also sending my general emails out every 3 days too, because now they've got 8 emails from me in a day. What's the likelihood they're going to read that? And so having a strategy in place, knowing what you want to talk about, and having some consistency there. So one trick that we like to use is we'll take a theme that we're going to talk about for the month, and we're going to talk about different topics in that. And so we'll put a social media post. Our social media posts will be kind of those generic blanket statements, those very memeable, those memes and those, one-liners. And then in our email copy, we'll tie in the longer content or the blog content that dives deep into that concept and idea. And that helps us with content creation so it doesn't get crazy and overwhelming. It also helps keep it organized. And it also helps us look at how relevant these topics are for our readers. So if we see engagement take a sharp decline, nobody's opening the emails, nobody's engaging or commenting on those posts, we know that, say, logos aren't really relevant. People don't really care about that as far as our audience is concerned. And so it's easier to read the data that way. So we're looking to make it easy because data can be kind of a pain in the butt to look at when you're just randomly throwing stuff out there and then trying to make sense of the mess. So if you put it out there in a clean and organized way, you can read it in a clean and organized way. Um, so
Yeah, and yeah, that makes sense. A lot of sense. And I love that you brought up a little bit of like social media, email, like how that messaging kind of needs to be the same across the board. Like you don't want to be promoting something on email and then on social media completely something different. Like it has to be consistent. And about social media, like how do you manage that, or how can you, like, talking about also like the engagement.
Yeah.
But I feel like, I mean, a lot of people are like small team or even solopreneurs. How do you have time to manage a lot? Like, what do you recommend for people that are by themselves and they need to, now they're thinking, oh, now I have to be on social media and sending out emails and running my business and trying to figure out, I don't know, selling online, like other stuff. So what do you recommend for managing kind of your presence
Yeah.
throughout different platforms?
So I'll give you a really abbreviated version of that because it can get, typically we do like a 2-day workshop on it. So I'm going to try and, I'm a talker, so I'm going to try and make it real simple and concise. So basically, what you want to do is number one, always have a strategy in place. The two, the two biggest things that are going to help you when it comes to your social media or your digital, we'll just say digital content because that includes your emails and your social media. Um, the two things that are going to be the biggest helper for you is to one, create a strategy so that way you know what you're doing ahead of time. Because it really stinks. I am sure most of you guys have had the experience where you're sitting down like, I know I got to post something today, but what the crap do I post, right? It's just really hard to be thinking on the fly. It's very difficult for most of us to create copy and write. It's like a chore for us, and so to have to sit down and do it without any kind of framework is really hard to do. So always have a strategy in place that will help organize your thoughts ahead of time so that you're just executing. It's almost like it's a difference between somebody asking you, hey, can you talk about insurance versus somebody asking you a specific question about insurance. If somebody asks you just generally, hey, talk about insurance, you probably are thinking, oh my God, what would I talk about? There's so much to say. But if I asked you a specific question, you could probably talk for hours answering that one specific question. And that's what we want to do when we organize our content. And the second thing is to batch your work. Um, Batch your work because it will create time efficiencies and energy efficiency, and it will make you so much happier and with a much better product. So, an example of how that works is one thing that we do when we create our marketing campaigns for the year for our clients is first we create the overall strategy. So, we look at what kinds of things are going to fall into the advertising category, which ones are going to fall into the marketing category, and which ones are going to fall into the sales category. And we create our lists. And from there, we create our themes. And from those themes, we create topics. So, for instance, a theme for our advertising is creating brand infrastructure, how important that is, and how it's so much more important than just logos and messaging, but creating the systems inside. And that's a theme. Now, within that, there are specific topics. What are the three things that go into a brand infrastructure? How do you create copy out of your infrastructure that sells? How do you translate your infrastructure into social media? So there's specific topics that go into the themes. And once you've done that, again, this is what you're doing in December of the year before. Ideally, right now, if you haven't done it before, there's no better time than the present. But having those specific themes and then topics. Now, once you have your topics, it's like someone's asking you a specific question. When somebody's asking you a specific question, it's much easier for you to create the content. So now you're answering that one question. So what is copy? What should copy look like for social media? Now that's something that's really easy. So now we get into batching. So now you've got your topic, create that content in batch. And what I mean by that is do all the work for that topic and have it all laid out. If you're going to write a blog, write your blog on it. Do your social media posts. Do 10 social media posts about it. Do do your weekly emails about it. Do 2 weekly emails about it. And so now in one day you've created all that content and you're really creating efficiency with your work. Your creativity is flowing because you're talking about it. And create each topic in that same way. Now, once you have all your topics, then it's just a matter of putting it on the calendar. And that's where you can mix it up and match it and lay it out based on how all your campaigns are going to run. But when you're creating it, you want to create them in organized batch buckets to make it easier for yourself. And then you can vary it up on social media and put it in the order that you would want it to be in for your marketing campaigns and your sales campaigns and things like that.
Okay, yeah, that I think like planning, I mean, for us, and I've seen it for other people that they're like, well, I don't know, they told me I need to post every day and also send out an email, and I'm just doing it whenever I can. And then and they also have like LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, and I'm like, I don't know if you need all that. Like, if you're
No.
not going to be posting on all that consistently, or if your audience is not on LinkedIn because you're a food truck, then don't be on LinkedIn. Like, you need to make sure that you're on the right platforms, or even if you just want to pick Instagram, not be on Facebook because that makes the most sense, well, then do Instagram as like the best you can. Like, pick one or two platforms and stick to them and create an audience there, or follow your market, right?
Yeah, if you're either new to social media marketing or new in business, or you don't have a team that handles it for you, or you've never done it with the campaign strategy before, because it kind of takes you a while, just like anything, it takes you a while to organize your space, but then once you do, it makes you work a lot faster. So if you're in that boat, I would say pick two platforms, just two. Keep it simple. Pick the two that are going to be the best for your audience and for your product and for your industry, and nail those, because you can't learn if you've got too much spread out. So if I'm on 8 platforms, there's no way you're going to learn all the cool little tricks. Like, how do you get those little emojis, and how do you do an IGTV, and how do you fill out a form on Instagram where you can create a poll and it just clicks to your story, and like all the little cool tricks and tools of that platform. You can't learn it if you've got 8. You also can't take good data if you're not able to post consistently on the platforms that you're using, because there's too many variables. And so just stick with two, nail those two, learn how to find your audience on those two, and then it becomes much easier to repeat for the third and fourth platform later, once you've gotten your groove and you've gotten your feet under you. Um, but as far as frequency goes, I mean, obviously social media more often than emails, but the frequency just really depends on your industry, and just base it off of how quickly and how fast paced your industry actually is. So restaurants move fast, photography moves fast, events move fast, fashion moves fast. Those are industries that you want to move really quickly. In business, entrepreneurship, that moves fast. Other industries like insurance, if you run an HVAC company, if you run, you're an auto mechanic, those are less fast. And those are companies that um, people don't necessarily want to read a novel about every week. I mean, those are ones that you can probably uh, do a little bit less often.
Yes, that's a great point. And then from the point of budgeting, I know it's sometimes hard. Like, people are like, well, I'm not going to spend 30% of my revenue like in marketing or branding. Or maybe they're not ready. Like, what would you say is a like realistic budget for it? Like, people should, and we've talked about this, like when you come in and do workshops that are free to our membership, to our members, but then you really, it's not a, like, they're not going to go out there and hire someone, or even apply everything that you said just because they're not ready. A lot of times people don't kind of look at time spent and money spent. Or so what do you suggest, like, for somebody that's thinking about starting a company or already started? Like, what's a good, like, this is the normal in the industry, and this is how much time you need to be spending, how much money, or even talent, like you need to hire someone or contract it out. Like, what are those numbers or kind of ratios look like?
Yeah, so overall speaking, and again, it depends on your industry and what your cost of goods is, and your labor looks like. But overall, max you want to spend 15% of your revenue on your marketing. And that's, anywhere between 8, well, not 8, anywhere between 10 and 15%, depending on what your industry is. But that's for an established company. When you're launching a company, you're obviously going to be spending a lot more, a bigger percentage of it, of your revenue on that. Um, when you're launching, one thing to consider is, or one thing that we tell clients is, you can do it in steps rather than having to replace it. Meaning, like some clients that we have, we recommend, for most companies, well, for all companies, we recommend that they do the entire style guide, which is your logo, your submarks, your patterns, your fonts, your headers, your online, your social media portfolio. So we give you a bunch of templates that are all on brand that you use, um, all of that, the whole style guide. But not everybody has a budget for that. And so what we recommend is, if that's the case, then start with the logo and then do everything else as a neutral. Use more neutral colors, or, don't go crazy. Use more neutral fonts. And then as your budget allows, you can add in the submarks, the color palettes, the fonts, all the little collateral pieces, packaging, whatever that is. But better to do it that way than to go to just a graphic designer, like a random graphic designer that's an artist that doesn't know how to apply it to business and business strategies, and have a random logo made with the colors and the fonts, but it's not well done. And then later in a year say, oh, I'll rebrand it in a year. Well, the reality is that it's more expensive to rebrand yourself than it is to just take a small piece and then grow it out. And also then you have the work of having to rebrand, and having, all your brochures and your business cards and your, what do you call it? Your tablecloths and your tents and everything, signage, everything redone. Um, but at the same time, don't blow your budget on all things brand, and then you don't have the money left over to produce, and you have nothing to sell. So it's a balance for sure. But make sure that you give yourself a proper budget for that, and make sure that the two things that are most important when you start your brand is to be able to sell it and to be able to produce it at the volume that you currently have. A lot of people will spend more money on, the quart mixer, and or the big giant, mixer, industrial size mixer, instead of the 2-quart mixer, even though their volume only needs a 2-quart mixer. But they're planning, well, yeah, but if I buy, the big one now, then I don't have to buy it later. But the problem is that if that purchase takes away from your ability to market and your strategy, you're not, you're stealing money from marketing to buy products for when you get big. It begs the question, well, then how are you going to get big? How are you ever going to get the volume to support that big mixer purchase if you're not spending the money to get them in the door? And so it's definitely, a balance. And I know as artists, it's really easy to want to do that. So, sometimes we work with chefs, and it's, funny because when you start buying equipment for your new business, you want to buy the biggest and the best and all the cool gadgets that your boss never let you have, because now you get to decide. But then there's no money left over for marketing and branding, and so making sure that you set a budget and then stick to that budget for each. Don't go over on any budget, including your branding. You don't want to be spending a ton of money, but make sure you have a startup budget, just like you have a startup budget for your tools and equipment that you'll use for your industry, which is higher than what your ongoing equipment budget will be. The same should be done for your branding and your marketing.
Yes, and you say sometimes you're working, like you live with a chef, so
Yeah, I use a lot of chef examples because I remember.
yes. So I mean, we're I don't know if anybody has questions, if they want to jump in or put them in the chat, but I don't know if for this time and for your clients that you're getting, I know we started the conversation a little bit with the whole COVID situation, but with anybody that's approaching you, or anybody who's asking you questions on mentorship around, like, what should I do with my brand right now? What would you suggest, like, as an overall kind of advice for people that are struggling to Because right now, like, yes, email and social media, but it's kind of tapped out. Like, everyone's doing the
Yeah.
same thing, everyone's saturated. So, how can you stand out? Or I know you mentioned like by giving back, like if people see that you're a community advocate, but what if you're new, or what if you never done that, or what if people can't find you because everyone's doing it? Like, what are some of the tips or suggestions you're giving them? And I know, like you mentioned, this is going to last for a while, so it's not like, well, I didn't do that in March, so I'm not going to do anything. So what are you suggesting for people to do?
Yeah, well, there's a couple pieces of advice depending on what your goal is. So if your goal is awareness, so say you have no following, like, well, they said to do social media, but I've got 19 followers, a lot of good that's going to do me. Then what I would recommend is finding a way to be of service to the people that are getting attention, so you get natural, organic, free press. So that would be like, say you just started a coffee shop, like a coffee truck, let's just say, or you just opened up a little cafe. So then, and you have like 20 followers. So then a great idea for you would be to donate, like, maybe a couple urns of coffee to medical or Methodist or, one of the hospitals, take a bunch of photographs, put it in there, and then be sure there's a couple things. Be sure to tag the person who does have the audience. So make sure that you're tagging Methodist Hospital, or, so be strategic in who you're giving it to. You don't want to give it to another no name, because then that's not really going to help anybody find you, right? So when you're thinking like, okay, I don't have an audience, but I do have all this coffee that I bought that's going to go bad in a month, and so I'd rather use it for media, press, and marketing than just let it sit. So then find out who's a good fit. Go on their social media, look to see who's getting a lot of traction, who's getting a lot of engagement, and those are the people that you want to be giving to. And then you take your photos, you tag them in the post to make sure that you're getting their audience, because you're basically borrowing their audience. So now all the 10,000 people that follow whatever place you donated to are now seeing you, and that's going to help with your awareness. Also, another little trick, just as a tool trick, is like on Instagram, you can also not just tag the post, but go into the photo and tag the photo. And that will strengthen how many people from that company that you donated to are seeing you. And then be sure to use your hashtag system. So make sure that you're using hashtags for the relevant topics: COVID, coffee break, all those kinds of things. Look what's relevant in your industry and tag that. And when you tag it, don't tag it to the post, tag it as the first comment, because that's more strategic. You'll get more traction that way. And also having the comment will help it look like you have more engagement, which will make it more relevant as far as Instagram's concerned. So it's just like more of a algorithm techie trick. So if you don't have an audience, that's a good way to get it right now. Leverage some audience from other people who are. So how can you get in good with them? Maybe if you're doing cloth masks, and you can do that for nurses, or whomever, or maybe you're I had um, a client that donated. They sold them, but they also donated. So she's a wedding cake maker, and gourmet goodies, and so right now her corporate clients aren't buying corporate gifts, so she's out of revenue. She shut down. So what we did was we did made these little cookie do it yourself cookie decorating kits. And so for Easter and now Cinco de Mayo, and so selling them to parents, and because their kids are at home and they don't know what to do with their kids. And so what was great about that is that not only was she selling them, but she donated like 10 boxes or so to um, you know different schools or homeschools, or people. And so those places, those platforms are getting a lot of traction because parents are getting on. Maybe you never looked at NISD before, and you weren't following them on Instagram now, or you weren't following them on Instagram before, but you are now, because you've got to get your kids' curriculum, and you want to know what's going on and what announcements are happening and when they're opening school again. So now all of a sudden you're following them on Instagram, and so, or Facebook. And so if she donates those kits to the school and posts about it and tags them. Now these parents are seeing her post, and now they're going in to buy their cookie sheets for them. So do you see how that kind of, that loop, that tagging system really works? So as long as you've got a strategy and you're strategic about it, and she sold hundreds of those little things, those little kits. I mean, it was crazy. So uh, use it. So if you don't have an audience, even if you do, you can use that to leverage. If you already have an established audience, then your angle or your goal should be more about creating engagement. So keeping them still interested, even though they can't swing by your shop every day. And so those are things to consider. And so for you, it's going to be more about posting your own content. And so think about what would be relevant in this time for them. So what new problem has surfaced uh, for your client that maybe wasn't there before? So for instance, one of our clients is an interior decorator, a residential interior decorator. And so right now, with the economy being what it is, there wasn't a lot of projects being sold, and she couldn't really meet with clients and do her pitch or leads, and so what she's doing right now is she is booking appointments through offering content. So her engagement, her pieces that were going out for blogs, vlogs, and social media were all about tools and tips for setting up a home office, because that's so it's relevant to what she does. It's content. So that's how she's keeping her audience engaged, because that's a problem that they now have. Everybody who's been working in the office has now had to either, dust off the old spare bedroom into an office, or has had to create a space for their kids to work, or maybe they don't have a big home, and so they're trying to convert their dining room into a little makeshift office. And so organizing, efficiency, tips to making a home office, all those kinds of things. How to set up a kids school area in your home without it destroying the decor of the whole house. Those are the content pieces that are creating engagement, so that people will go in and open them and read them, and um, still be connected, so that way when she can go out and work
Yeah.
them,
And
they're
it's still
able to do it.
relevant. It's not like you mentioned, maybe a little bit of pivoting, but you want to stay in tune or like that is still relevant to your brand or what you're doing. Because even though, like, I know, like, we've seen distilleries doing hand sanitizer, like, oh yeah, that's great as a project or like as a community give back, but they still want to be recognized for they're selling liquor or
Yeah.
like it's not all about, okay, now we're going to do masks and you focus all your efforts on masks while you actually sell, I don't know, boxes or whatever, and then you're like kind of people recognize you for something that's not you at the end of the day, then you just started selling something that's not even in your wheelhouse, or you have to kind of brand towards a new product that you created for the situation, right?
Yeah, so and that's where we talk about evolving versus not evolving. So say you're making masks, for instance. Well, what's the story? How does that tie into what you normally do? So say you make purses with out of fabric like Vera Bradley, and so now you're making masks, and so there's got to be a story there, and there's got to be that longevity there. So if this is still happening, for the next year, and people are still buying masks, then how can we evolve the brand? So now it's like your matching purse and mask set, or whatever it is, purse, mask, socks, whatever it is that you sell, right? If So what's the story there? And so um, you really want to make sure that if it's tied to an offer, there's an evolution there instead of a pivot. So it's absorbing this in there. So she's an interior designer. So designing office space and tips for organizing your office space is still within her wheelhouse. And if you want it professionally done, I can help you with that, right? And so she's still in her wheelhouse, and she's still doing what she's doing, but it's an evolution. It's something that's being absorbed into the process. And so that's when we talk about marketing as a form of brand evolution versus companies that do general things um, for brand reputation purposes. So a company that you know pivots from brewing beer to making hand sanitizer, they're not doing that so much for the ROI. It would make more sense for them to do those what do you call those big kegs that you can pick up and bring home? I forgot the word.
I don't know.
Yeah, they look like those old school like Middle Ages jugs
Yeah,
of
I
beer that
know,
you can.
mug.
I don't know what they're
Maybe
called.
like a mug.
Yeah. So from a product evolution standpoint, that makes more sense. Them switching to making hand sanitizer was a goodwill brand reputation approach. That was a brand reputation thing. That was them wanting to be seen as a certain type of person within the community. And that's totally separate. You're not When you do things like that, you're not doing it for profit. You're doing it as free free or inexpensive marketing is essentially what you're doing. Free or inexpensive, not marketing, free or inexpensive
Yeah.
advertising. And so there's different, what I get out of it kind of
Yeah,
scenarios.
and I think for now, like, it's a great opportunity also as partnerships. Like, maybe you don't have, like, you're a insurance agent and you're really not gonna go start creating masks, but maybe you can support somebody that's doing it, and that also shows kind of you're doing something or you're supporting. Like, you really don't have to be, I mean, you can do it, but how much time, like, is it going to hurt you in the long run? Like, where are your efforts standing? Like, what are you selling? And focus a little bit more on that, and not just like have a purpose also behind what you're doing, right?
Yeah, so like just going back to that hand sanitizer thing, if you look at it from just a net margin standpoint, the cost of making hand sanitizer versus the cost of making beer versus what you can sell a gallon of beer for and what you can sell a gallon of hand sanitizer, it's a huge difference because we can't gouge prices right now. Hand sanitizers, a quart of hand sanitizer is worth a heck of a lot less than a quart of beer, right? And so when you look at it like that, that's how you know that wasn't something that they did to turn a profit. It would have made way more sense for them to just do their beers to go since San Antonio lifted that restriction. That, from a profit and loss standpoint, that's what makes way more sense. And as soon as they got that information, they were probably doing that as well. But the hand sanitizer thing was a great advertising, strategy. That was something that was done. And yeah, so for insurance agents, I wouldn't make a product because that's not what they do. What I would do is maybe put together a series of training courses, like understanding your policy. What can you do? How can your insurance support you in your endeavors? So for instance, commercial insurance companies are um, their clientele are business owners. And what are business owners doing right now? They're pivoting, evolving, changing their offers. And so what would they need to help them do that from an insurance company? Probably some clarity around what types of things their insurance policy already covers, because they don't want to take on a new expense. And they want to make sure, hey, if I start manufacturing hand sanitizer, does my insurance cover that? Does my liability still cover that if someone gets sick and eats it on accident, or? And so putting together training series that will help educate them and maybe down the line upsell them to a coverage that they maybe don't have now that they should have if they want to start producing something new or different, right? And so that would be a more reasonable thing for an insurance company to do. Like, they're not going to start making masks or producing hand sanitizer, something that either will immediately lead to an upsell or within the foreseeable future it kind of opens the door for you to come in and approach them with something, an offer that you have.
Yes. And like you mentioned, like, we really don't know how much this is going to last. So you want to make sure that you're also looking into the future, not just like instantly trying to pivot and do something, and then you're maybe scarce in your resources just because you're trying to fit in with, like, whatever's going on right now. So
Yeah.
I
And you
think
don't
that
want to
makes a
create
lot of
something
sense.
that's going to cannibalize your own sales later
Yeah.
either. So something that people are going to be like, oh, well, this is almost the same and it's way cheaper. So I'll just do this from now on. And when you open back your store, it's not worth it for me to go back in and do it, right? So you want to be
Yes.
really careful when you develop out these offers that it's done in a way that's not going to cannibalize,
Yeah. And
what
we've
your
seen
bread
it
and butter
with
is.
members that maybe have a product and now they're shipping because they started shipping online or using whatever mail service, and they're like, well, it cost me more to ship like lip gloss than like the shipping cost than the actual product. So now I'm losing money like shipping. So you want to make sure that if you're opening yourself to online sales or shipping or whatever, like you're looking into maybe have a like I don't know at least $20 or whatever, because you want to make sure like yes you're selling, but you're also not kind of harming your business by not pricing correctly based on the new model, which is not just storefront purchases or market purchases, but now you're kind of online and you have other expenses, right?
Yeah, and look how, and then when you develop out that offer, look at how you can incentivize people to do that. So instead of just putting their like, $20 limit, you got to have at least $20 for free shipping. How can you position it in a new and exciting way? So you have $20 minimum shipping. So then what are the offers and what are the upsells? So maybe it's, lip gloss. And then if you buy the face moisturizer, I don't know what they sell, I'm just making this up, right? You get 20% off, add it to your cart, and that pays for the shipping, or whatever it is, right? And so, finding out how you develop out your offers to make it more of a, hey, look what I'm doing for you, instead of a restrictiveness. And so the air of what you're doing, the way you're coming across as a brand, are you, does it look like a giant no shoes, no shirt, no service kind of sign, or does it look like something that's fun and exciting? Because we always are thinking when we're developing offers, how do we still maintain the uh, the desirability factor in what we're doing? Um,
Yes.
so there's ways, around saying that.
No, and I mean, it was just great
Yeah,
kind of having you today, because maybe like I feel like people come up with all these ideas to sell or to do something else, but you're giving the perspective like yes do that, but also have a way that you're incentivizing people to open your email, to click on your product, to buy your product, to engage with your post or whatever is like your call to action. Because a lot of the times yes you have great ideas to do it, like hey I'm gonna I don't know launch this new thing, but really haven't thought about like how am I going to push it. And it's like yes I need people to buy at least $30 off my online store in order to be worth it for me to ship them product, but then you're not what you said like incentivizing that. So I think your inside gives more on like what's the perspective from the outside, like what are people looking at, like am I going to subscribe to your emails, am I going to engage with you, is your email relevant to me as a customer, should I, or even you as a business owner, like don't cry every time somebody unsubscribes, because that just means like you're building a better audience for yourself, and that wasn't your target audience, right? So don't beat yourself up from those fails or those kind of um, unsubscribers that you get. So I don't know if you have any final thoughts, but I really appreciate we are over time. So I don't know if you have anything last thoughts to share, or if somebody has a question, they can ask it now.
you want to see if someone has a question, because I've done a lot of talking. See if anybody.
Well, I don't think. Well, we are going to be releasing this as a podcast and YouTube, so I'll share that with you.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Sarah, do you have any final thoughts? But I really appreciate you taking this time to share your perspectives with small business owners. I know it's very valuable to hear from a branding expert, like what can you do and what things to look at when you're building your brand, or even kind of assessing if it's working or not, and strategies you can put in place. So appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just best of luck, and everybody, hang tight. Stay the course. You do have an amazing offer that people are going to want. Um, it's just finding a way to acclimate it into the new
Yeah.
environment. So yeah, don't lose
Okay.
faith. Stay positive. Get help.
I'm gonna stop